Today we're going to look at Google's internal leak document. It's a very important document, I would say, and if you want to read one document this week for AI, there will be this document. The title, we have no moat, and neither does OpenAI. What does this mean? It basically says they have no moat against the open source community, and OpenAI also does not. Why? In terms of large language modeling. Because you may ask a ChatGPT, GPT-4 is such a big innovation, right? And people couldn't even get close to it. So why? They have a few reasons. And I will share my thoughts on this, why I disagree with this. I'll give you my solid reasons. So let's just dive right in. According to these documents, I'll give you some summaries here. So it says open source surpass Google and OpenAI in foundation model development in terms of speed, not in terms of the final results. So far, even the best open source models still quite far away, still there's a distance away from ChatGPT, not to mention GPT-4. But in terms of speed of development, it argues it's quite fast and repeat the open source progress with Meta's LLaMA model. Because LLaMA model leak, and a lot of people just use it to do a lot of development. That's why a lot of surrounding ecosystems involved with LLaMA model. The implications for Google and OpenAI is they need to focus on collaborations with open source community, because people prefer unrestricted and free alternatives. If you always use this kind of closed model, people can only access this through API, and people will not really use it. People will develop their own one. This is the argument. That's why now the open source community movement is so fast, and Google and OpenAI shouldn't fight against it. It should go with it. It's basically the argument. He argues something. Let's just see the graph. So this is the graph, the LLaMA based model. Let's just see the LLaMA until the pure language model, LLaMA 13 billion. It's only 68% compared to ChatGPT. They use GPT-4 to rate the response. They give one instruction to these models, and model will generate response, and use GPT-4 to rate how would you rate this response from 1 to 10. And they compare this score to ChatGPT. So this is why you see ChatGPT compared to itself is 100%. And other model is still less than ChatGPT. So let's just see the LLaMA model 13 billion. It's only 68% of ChatGPT. But Alpaca, which is LLaMA model, do instruction fine-tuning, increased quite a lot to 76. And Vicuna model is even doing more instruction fine-tuning. It's 92% to the ChatGPT. And this bar model Vicuna model is almost as good as a bar model, but still there's 8% difference to ChatGPT. So this argument for this article is the open source communities, this kind of open source model evolve very, very quickly. 2 weeks later, we have Alpaca, and 1 more week, we got the Vicuna. And at this rate, this model will surpass ChatGPT, so it shouldn't fight against it. There's a lot of techniques in the open source community, like, for example, you have LoRA adapter, which is kind of a low rank adapter. You don't have to fine tune the entire model. You only need to have one layer, and then you fine tune that. So you can plug it and play. So it's an easy way to do. And they have a lot of smaller model and have very good performance, and the iteration is pretty quick. It's basically every few days you have a new model bump up, and this is really fast progress. Like big companies like OpenAI or Google, they couldn't even keep a path with that. So this is a basic argument of these things. And he also argues why you should work with the open source community, because LLaMA model now, it leaks, and all the ecosystems involved surrounded and all the ecosystems involved with LLaMA. So Facebook is actually the biggest benefit because when there are a lot of tens of hundreds of open source projects, that's all compatible to LLaMA model. Facebook, Meta, they can just use it. As opposed to other companies, they have different base model, different large language models. They couldn't just use those LLaMA ecosystem, right? So they say what is why you should release model. Maybe you don't have to release all the model. You can release smaller models to a community. The community will develop a lot of great tools, great plugins around it, or great techniques, so you can just use it. So that's why I say This document says Google needs open source community more than they need Google. So this is a basic argument, and OpenAI is basically facing the same problem. They will also have this problem, and they are facing it. And another example he gave, I think this is a very good example, stable diffusion. Stable diffusion is an image generation model, and before that, there was a DALL-E model developed by OpenAI. It's very good, DALL-E 1, DALL-E 2, and you can just give it a prompt, it will generate text for you. But over the time, there's a stable diffusion, the kind of open source model, and because they release it open source, so a lot of people, developers, engineers, scientists, they just use it and kind of modify it, make it much better. So it's the rate of improving is really, really quick, and they have a lot of great tool for that. As opposed to DALL-E 2, you don't have that kind of ecosystem. Now you can just use open source tool and generate the images. That's even better than DALL-E 2. I would say they may be true, and they say large language models is going to become like this. We don't know it for sure yet, but all elements are very similar. This is basic argument of these articles, but I do not agree. I agree with these things like, yes, Google, OpenAI, they will be beneficial to work with open source community. For this point, I really agree with it. Just for example, right, PiTorch was like firstly developed by FAIR, Facebook's AI research group, and it becomes very, very good open source projects of almost the whole entire research communities switch to PiTorch over TensorFlow, and now you have if you do deep learning, most likely you will be using PiTorch. And imagine Facebook, they definitely have a lot of like their internal tools is using PiTorch, so they can just plug and play PiTorch system. As opposed to Google, they definitely stick with TensorFlow, but nobody using TensorFlow now. Who's benefiting more? Definitely Facebook. If you have this kind of ecosystem that's being used by the community a lot, you benefit a lot. Even you may argue TensorFlow is also open source, but just PiTorch is much better tool, right? So that's why just the demoing use the benefit of having open source in the community that's been used. Okay. But my argument is not for this open source. I will say OpenAI still have very, very huge moat. The moat is not to the model itself, it's also to their infrastructure. So I want to argue first is, even like open source, you see this rate, right? This kind of open source model improvement, I would say they will never catch up with latest version of OpenAI model. Now it's GPT-4. This model is like still 20% worse than GPT-4. And when they catch up GPT-4, they may release GPT-5. So they will always be like 20% worse than the model. Why I'm saying that is because actually GPT-1 was released in 2018, 5 years ago. And then they released GPT-2, GPT-3. Open source community is always there. It's always there. People are always trying to replicate these kind of models, but they always fail to catch up with OpenAI. They're always like one generation behind OpenAI. This is not a phenomenon. This is not a new phenomenon. Large language model or language models is always there, and open source language models always there. It's just very hard for open source community to get the resources they need, collect enough data, have enough compute power to do that. Now this model can kind of evolve this fast. It's all thanks to GPT-4, because they have GPT-4 as a teacher to teach these models. If you do this distillation, your student model is almost impossible to surpass your teacher. So I would just say open source communities, open source model, it's like there's very less chance they will catch up with OpenAI. So that's my first point. Why OpenAI still have very strong moat. This is good. Open source progress is good, but you will still not catch up. And secondly, OpenAI is actually their biggest advantage, biggest moat is hardware-software integration. They have a very good infrastructure to serve these kind of large language models. They say maybe one day open source community we train a model that's as good as GPT-4. But how can you serve GPT-4? It's such a large model. How can you run GPT-4 in a very cost-effective way and can open up for people to use for production usage? That's very hard, because if you just run on your GPU, you don't do any optimization, you end up spending a lot of money, and you end up being more expensive than GPT-4. Even you have very good model, but you just won't be able to use it. You won't be able to actually use it for any production things, right? Because it's too expensive. And OpenAI, because they kind of have very good collaboration with Microsoft, and they have their cloud, so they can serve. That's why they can serve ChatGPT at such a lower price, right? And Google has the same mode. I would say they have Google Cloud. If they want, they can definitely make model serving very, very cheap. That's what most open source community couldn't do. Even small startups, they couldn't just do it. Secondly, scaling is still a very good, very big thing, right? Because like they have very good hardware, software integration, and they have OpenAI, Google have large customer base, so they can easily bring down the cost a lot because of the scale. Last thing is ecosystem. OpenAI is also trying to build out their moat by building out the ecosystem. That's why they kind of building ChatGPT plugins. It's basically the app stores. When more people using these kind of things, more people building their apps around it, plugins, and you will drop more users, and more users will attract more developers. So this is like two-sided network effects. It would eventually build out a very kind of moat, right? Which is a much better ecosystem than a lot of things. Then people will come stick with this system. You will become bigger and bigger. So that's why it's the same thing, like first mover has advantage, and OpenAI is trying to leverage that. Not to mention other modes. The only thing that will stop OpenAI from progressing and the open source community can catch up, the only reason so far potentially there is data. There's a research. Actually, they did a research saying we actually going to run out of high quality text data by 2024, which is next year. We will not have enough high quality language data to train a new model, because so far we just scaling up the model, then have better performance. But we almost already use all the data we can have from the internet to train a model. So what's the next? GPT-5? Do you have even more data to train the GPT-5? Probably not. And in 2032, we will even run out of low quality language data. Same goes to the images, right? So when we don't really have new data to train even larger model, we don't have 10x more data to train a 10x bigger models. What will happen? The development, the progress will still. Then that's actually a very good time for other small companies and also open source community to catch up with big giants like OpenAI, Google. That's the only way I can see open source community catch up OpenAI. But you never know, because there may be some potential innovation, right? OpenAI may come up with new techniques. They can make the model even better without getting more data. But I don't think that will be that easy, because coming out with new techniques is hard. It's not like scaling up that easy, right? So I think open source community will catch up, but not now. Probably will catch up in like 3, 4, 5 years later when OpenAI hits this data plateau. Not because of it now. See this graph, definitely not because of this. And OpenAI can still enjoy the moat for 3 years at least. So that's my thoughts. But definitely I want to clarify. I'm very happy to see open source community that growing up so fast, and people working on machine learning projects and publicizing these kind of open source models, so more people can have easy access to it. And this transparency thing, open source phenomenon, is very good in machine learning community. I'm I don't agree they will catch up with OpenAI very soon. That's it. If you would like to receive more deep learning videos, don't forget to subscribe this channel and share this channel with your friends. Other than that, I will see you next time.